How did the meeting go last week, and what were some of the highlights?
I actually find council meetings really enjoyable. This group of councillors is prepared to put their points of view forward, bring various ideas forward, debate various items, but do it all in a very respectful manner. And Thursday's council meeting was no different to that. There were different ideas, different things that were discussed by councillors at the meeting, but ultimately we put things to a vote and we vote on those and we move on to the next item. So it seems like we're getting on with the business of council, making things happen, bringing different ideas forward, but making sure we do it all with still respect, and then being able to go out and have a meal afterwards, which I think is really important. One of the big things from the discussion on Thursday night was really a couple of things that were somewhat linked. Saxa Road, and obviously roads in general are pretty bad, but Saxa Road in particular is an important road in our region, but a road that certainly is suffering a lot at the moment, and I'll get into more detail on that at the moment, but also a preparation of a renewable energy framework to try and get some benefits for the community out of some of the renewable energy that's occurring in this area, and that can have direct implications for areas like Saxa Road. So even though those two things are somewhat separate, I think the linkage between those two will become quite obvious as we keep going through in the discussion. The other thing was the social media policy. We had that on public exhibition. We had a couple of submissions to that, but that's now been adopted for councillors and council officials. So I think that was good as well. And something that's easy to gloss over is the presentation of our financial statements for the 2021-22 financial year. And again, we've talked about it before about some of that operating loss that we've experienced over the previous 3 years before this council came along, a $20.3 million operating loss there. This council in the first, we've only been in this position for half a financial year, there was an $8.8 million operating loss in that financial year. And so what we've got to do is start turning that around. And obviously we only came along at the end of December, so it's pretty hard to turn the ship at that stage. But certainly that's the commitment we're making this financial year, is to turn that ship around. So a few different things in there, but happy to talk about any of those or whatever other areas of the meeting you want to in more detail.
You did mention the renewable energy benefit framework. Can you go into that in a bit more detail? Tell me exactly how is the community going to benefit from council? Tell me a bit about that.
So this is really about the benefits that proponents of renewable energy give to council or the community as part of that particular proposal. Now, the very confusing thing that I've never really been able to understand and never really had explained to me is that if you put in a wind farm, you have to pay, as part of the consent authority process, you have to pay some money to the community. And in the example of the Badenga wind farm, for example, there's $85,000 that flows to the community each year. In the case of the Ungala wind farm, which hasn't started construction yet, but the proposals are pretty well at the final stage there, there's a $320,000 benefit that will come to the community. But when you look at solar farms, it's not compulsory to pay any money to the community. So we've got a 200 megawatt facility there as you go along the Mudgee Road out towards the Wellington Correctional Centre. That's a huge solar farm there. $0 is paid to the community as part of that. And that's, again, very confusing from my perspective. We try to push those proponents to have some sort of community benefit fund, but we've got two problems in that. One problem in particular is that we are not the consent authority. So we do not get the opportunity to say yes or no whether those processes go forward. And the second part of the problem is it's not compulsory for them to pay any money. By creating this community benefits fund framework, what we hope to do is strongly encourage some of those proponents to do something in terms of the community. Again, how much power we've got to say you definitely have to do it is limited, but we want them to do it as part of their social licence. The figure that's often thrown around is that, or the current figure that's thrown around, is that maybe 1.5% of the entire capital expenditure should come to the community over the life of that particular process. So, for example, if it was a $100 million capital expenditure, that means that $1.5 million might come to the community as part of that over, say, a 20-year or 25-year timeframe, the life of that particular process. Now, again, we've got to try and encourage that and work on a way to do that. So what the councillors have asked the staff to do is to go back and create a standard framework that we can point to, or a policy, if you want to call it that we can point developers to say this is what this council would like for the benefit of the community. That's going to be a long road there, but with all of these different renewable energy processes coming into play in our area, we think the community should get some benefits out of that.
Thank you for clarifying that, and hopefully there will be some kind of framework set then in future discussions. Moving on, I just wanted to hone in a little bit more onto the road issue. Now, you were quoted last week as saying that you didn't think the $50 million offered by the state government to local councils was really quite adequate to address the problem with the potholes on the roads that we have here. Is that the case? And what more could they do or could be done?
Certainly we welcome the $50 million. That's shared amongst 95 regional councils. I'm never going to say no when the state government offers some money, and I have had some discussions with Sam Farraway, the Regional Roads Minister, and certainly talked to him about the fact that, yes, thank you, we appreciate that extra fund. That was funds that was not budgeted, that was funds that certainly came out of the blue, but obviously we would like more. And to give him some sort of an idea of the quantum we're talking about, I explained to Sam that this financial year that we're in at the moment, Council in our budget have $28 million set aside for our roads. So we're already spending $28 million. In our infrastructure backlog, before these later series of rain events, we estimated that we had about $40 million extra that we needed to spend on our roads to get them up to an acceptable standard. The money, the $50 million that was spread across those 95 councils, means that each council approximately might get a little bit more than $500,000. Now, certainly, there's no doubt about it. We'll use that $500,000 without a doubt, and that will help improve our roads a little bit. But when you compare that to the $40 million backlog and the $28 million in our current budget, and a look at the state of our roads, we need a lot more than $500,000. So we welcome the state government to come up with different ideas, and we're coming up with some different innovative ideas as well about how we might bring forward some funding to spend on our roads and have that paid back, if you like, down the track with various proponents. They might be renewable energy proponents, they might be other developers, but we need some way of having money spent on our roads now without stressing the financial sustainability of council.
Now, moving on, Keswick Estate, you had 52 blocks that went up for auction. Now that that's completed, I believe 10 lots have been sold. Can you tell me what's the plan now? Do you think you should lower the reserve price to try and sell the rest of them, or are they going to be just put on the market? What's the plan? So
we sold the first auction, we had 17 put up, we sold 11 in that first auction. The second auction, a week later, we had 17 up and we sold 0. And then the third auction, we had another 18 put up, we sold 1 of those blocks. So overall, we sold 12 out of those 52 at auction. From now going forward, Council resolved on Thursday night to go to private treaty, so essentially a normal sale process. They'll be put on the market, they'll be at advertised prices, and then people will be able to come along and buy those directly off council. So the auction process was a different way. We've never done that many blocks in a chunk at a time. We've done maybe one-off blocks at an auction. That was a different way of going to market because the market was so hot. And obviously it didn't work out as well as we would have liked it to have worked out. And I think we probably were just a little bit late getting them on the market. A few months ago, I think they would have sold easier. Interest rates were obviously a small factor in that, and how hot the market was a few months ago with how much demand there was. So it certainly had not quite the outcome that we would have liked. Selling 12 out of 52 at auction wasn't exactly what we were after. But again, you've got to keep trying things. You can't keep doing things the same old way. And I think this council has shown it's prepared to be innovative, to be different in the way we're approaching things. Those blocks will be on sale from this week, and I think I'm pretty confident still we'll sell those in a fairly short period of time.
So I dare say this is indicative as well of the slowing of the market in general in the broader real estate.
I think the Reserve Bank is achieving exactly what it wants to achieve, in that it's trying to just take the heat out of everything in expenditure in the marketplace. So by increasing interest rates, definitely that's having the desired effect from the Reserve Bank, which is what the Reserve Bank wants in this scenario. Probably wasn't exactly what council wanted.
Right. Now, the 3D amenities block at West Lions Park, Is that well on its way? What's happening there? What's the timeline?
So we're going out to tender for that at the moment. The tenders close approximately 10th of November from memory, and then obviously we'll assess those tenders that come in and we'll choose one of those organisations that's put a tender in, and then it will be up to the successful tenderer in terms of when they actually do that particular block. I assume that that will happen in a fairly short time frame, so I hope sometime early next year we're seeing the construction of that amenities block at Lions Park via a 3D printing process. And I actually think that'll be something that will be a lot of interest from the public and a lot of interest from the media in the 3D printing of that block. I think there's been a lot of discussion in the community already, so I'm pretty excited to see that occur.
Oh, and I think particularly the prospect of actually building some 3D houses down the track. I mean, if this works out, I mean, is that the plan?
That's absolutely the plan. We have 4 blocks of our next release of houses in Keswick Estate, or next release of blocks in Keswick Estate, that are set aside specifically for a 3D printed house. But anyone that wants to come along and do the 3D printing of those houses, the logic is an amenities block is much easier and it's a good chance for them to show off their technology. So we hope there'll be some keen pricing in that particular 3D amenities block, and that'll be a chance for someone to show off what they can do before those 3D printed houses become a process next year.
Now, just lastly, I believe the LGA annual conference.
The Local Government New South Wales annual conference was last week. We had 4 councillors attend that and 1 staff member attend that. So successful conference from my perspective. Over 700 people were there, 128 councils represented there. And as you can imagine, Sam, the number one topic of conversation was the state of our road network and the funding, how we might get additional funding. So just that whole process with roads, everyone talked about the same thing. Roads are in a terrible condition. How do we get more money? How do we fund all this that we need to fund? Sam Farraway came along to that conference and spoke, as did a number of other members of government and ministers. And Sam got a great cheer from the audience when he announced $50 million there. Again, that was something that was out of the blue, but fantastic from a councillor perspective. We like to see that sort of announcement. I did make mention to Sam afterwards that he can come to as many conferences as he likes if he brings $50 million each time. It's always a very popular way to come to a conference. But I think just that sharing of information, sharing of knowledge, sharing of ideas and listening to some experts, from my perspective, a very successful conference.
Thank you so much for that, Matthew. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think that covers everything, Sam. I think you've done well to cover a few of those important points from the meeting.